Let me ask you something before we begin. Have you ever met someone in their 80s who moves like they're 60? Sharp mind, steady hands, eyes that still light up when they laugh? We tend to call them lucky. We say they won the genetic lottery. But here's what decades of research studying centenarians, longevity zones, and the human body's own healing systems have taught me. Luck has very little to do with it. The truth is, your body was designed with an extraordinary capacity to protect and repair itself, even into your 70s, 80s, and beyond. The people who thrive in this decade of life aren't doing anything mysterious. They're simply consistently doing a small number of things that most people quietly stop doing. Today, I want to walk you through 6 of them. Not vague advice like eat healthy or stay active, but specific, science-backed habits that separate the people who merely survive their 70s and 80s from those who genuinely flourish in them. If you're in this age range, or if you love someone who is, pay close attention, because if you're still doing even a few of these 6 things, you're not just aging well, you are, quite literally, one of a kind. Let's begin. Think about the last time you shook someone's hand. Was it firm, full of life, ready to meet the world? Or was it soft, hesitant, almost apologetic? It might seem like such a small, meaningless gesture, but here's something that surprised even researchers when the data first came in. Grip strength, that simple squeeze of your hand, turns out to be one of the most powerful predictors of how long and how well you're going to live. Not your cholesterol number, not even your blood pressure, your grip. Large studies following tens of thousands of people around the world found something remarkable. When researchers measured hand grip strength using a simple device called a dynamometer, they discovered that people with weaker grips face a significantly higher risk of heart disease, of dying earlier, of losing their independence. In fact, some studies found grip strength was a stronger predictor of cardiovascular death than systolic blood pressure itself. Let that sink in for a moment. The strength in your hand is quietly telling a story about the strength of your heart, your muscles, and even your brain. Why would something so simple carry so much information? Because your grip strength isn't really about your hand at all. It's a window into something much bigger. It reflects your overall muscle mass, and muscle is not just for lifting groceries or opening jars. Muscle is a metabolically active organ. It's a factory that produces proteins called myokines, molecules that circulate through your bloodstream and talk to your brain, your immune system, your blood vessels. When your muscles are strong and active, they send out signals that reduce inflammation, that protect your blood vessels, that even seem to nourish your brain cells. When muscle mass declines, that conversation between your body's systems starts to break down. This is why doctors now use grip strength as an early warning sign for a condition called sarcopenia, the age-related loss of muscle mass and function. Sarcopenia doesn't announce itself with a dramatic symptom. It creeps in quietly, starting sometimes as early as your 40s, accelerating through your 60s and 70s. And by the time someone in their 80s struggles to open a jar of pickles or twist a doorknob, what's actually happening beneath the surface is a broader decline that touches balance, touches bone density, touches even the immune system's ability to fight off illness. But here is a truly hopeful part of the story. Grip strength is not fixed. It is not a sentence written at birth. Unlike your genetics, unlike your age, this is something profoundly within your control, even in your 7th, 8th, 9th decade of life. I think of the countless studies on resistance training in older adults, some involving people in their 80s and 90s who began lifting light weights, doing simple resistance exercises just 2 or 3 times a week. Within months, not only did their grip strength improve, but researchers measured increases in muscle fiber size, improvements in balance, reductions in inflammatory markers in the blood. The body, it turns out, retains this remarkable capacity to rebuild itself, to respond to a stimulus, no matter how many birthdays have passed. So when I meet someone in their late 70s or 80s who still has a firm, confident handshake, who can still carry their own suitcase up a flight of stairs, who can still twist open a stubborn jar lid without asking for help, I don't see a small party trick of aging. I see a signal. I see evidence of a body that has been kept in conversation with itself, muscles still producing those protective molecules, a cardiovascular system still being called upon to do its job, a nervous system still practicing the coordination it takes to squeeze, to grip, to hold on tight. This is why the simple act of maintaining your grip strength through carrying, through gripping, through resistance work, whether it's a resistance band, a light dumbbell, or simply working in the garden with your bare hands, becomes one of the most quietly powerful things you can do for your entire body as you move through your 7th and 8th decades. Because your hand was never just a hand. Picture a staircase. Nothing dramatic, just an ordinary flight of stairs, the kind found in homes, in train stations, in office buildings, everywhere. Now picture someone in their late 70s standing at the bottom of it. What do? Increasingly, the answer is they look for another way. The elevator, the ramp, someone's arm to lean on. And it happens so gradually, so reasonably, that almost nobody notices the moment it starts. A knee twinges once, so the elevator seems wiser. A little breathlessness one afternoon, so the ramp seems safer. Within a year or two, an entire category of movement has quietly vanished from someone's life, and with it, something far more valuable than convenience has been lost. Here is what the research on aging populations has taught us, and it is more striking than most people realize. Climbing stairs is one of the few remaining everyday movements that simultaneously demands cardiovascular effort, muscular strength, balance, and coordination all at once in a single unremarkable act. There is almost no other ordinary daily behavior that asks this much of the body in such a short burst. A brisk walk works your heart. A stretch works your flexibility. But climbing stairs asks your quadriceps, your glutes, your calves, your heart, your lungs, your inner ear, and your proprioceptive system, your sense of where your body is in space, to all coordinate together instantly without you ever consciously thinking about it. Large population studies following older adults have found that those who continue climbing stairs regularly maintain significantly better cardiovascular fitness than those who avoid them, even when both groups walk similar distances on flat ground. One study following thousands of adults found that the ability to climb stairs without stopping was itself a predictor of survival, independent of age, independent of most chronic conditions. Some researchers have gone as far as using stair climbing speed as a simple, no equipment needed proxy for what's happening inside the cardiovascular system. If your body can still carry you up 2 flights without your heart pounding into your throat, that tells a doctor something meaningful about the health of your arteries, your lung capacity, your VO2 max, all without a single needle or scan. But the story goes deeper than the heart. Think about what actually happens biomechanically when you climb a step. Your body must generate enough force in your leg muscles to lift your entire body weight against gravity over and over, while your brain calculates in real time exactly how high to lift your foot, exactly when to shift your weight, exactly how to catch yourself if a step is higher or lower than expected. This is an extraordinarily sophisticated neuromuscular task. Every time you climb stairs, you are essentially running a rehearsal for balance, for fall prevention, for the kind of split-second bodily coordination that keeps people independent well into their 80s and 90s. This is precisely why avoiding stairs can become such a quiet trap. The less you climb, the weaker those specific muscles become, the less practice that balance system stays, and the harder stairs feel the next time you attempt them. It becomes a self-fulfilling retreat. Avoidance breeds weakness, and weakness confirms the avoidance. Meanwhile, the person who continues, even slowly, even one hand on the railing, is doing something remarkable each time. They are telling their cardiovascular system to stay sharp. They are telling their leg muscles to stay engaged. They are telling their inner ear and their brain's balance centers to keep doing their sophisticated split-second calculations. I think often about longevity populations around the world, places where people in their 80s and 90s still climb hillsides to tend gardens, still walk up multiple flights to reach their homes, still navigate uneven stone steps every single day without a second thought. It is not a coincidence that so many of these same populations show remarkably low rates of falls, low rates of cardiovascular disease, and an ability to remain independent deep into old age. Their environment simply never gave their bodies permission to forget how to climb. So when I meet someone in their late 70s or 80s who still takes the stairs, who still refuses the elevator out of habit rather than stubbornness, I recognize something significant happening beneath the surface. Their heart is still being challenged in the way it was designed to be challenged. Their muscles are still being asked to do real work against gravity. Their balance system is still rehearsing the coordination that keeps falls at bay. There is a question I like to ask people when I meet them, especially those a little further along in years. I ask, what is something you learned recently? Not decades ago, not in school, recently. The response tells me almost everything I need to know about what's happening inside their brain. Some people pause, genuinely searching, and then light up, describing a new recipe they attempted, a language app they've been experimenting with, a documentary that sent them down a rabbit hole of research, a grandchild who taught them how a video game works. Others go quiet, a little uncomfortable, and admit that nothing comes to mind. Both answers, it turns out, are far more medically meaningful than they first appear. For decades, we assumed cognitive decline was simply the price of admission for growing older, an inevitable dimming of the lights that nobody could do much about. But research into brain aging has revealed something far more hopeful and far more specific. The brain possesses a remarkable property called neuroplasticity, the capacity to form new neural connections, to rewire itself, to grow at any age. This was once thought to stop in childhood. We now know it continues into our 80s and 90s. But here is the critical detail. Neuroplasticity is not automatic. It is not something that happens simply because you are alive and breathing. It is a use it or lose it system, activated specifically by novelty, by challenge, by the discomfort of not yet knowing something. This is why curiosity turns out to be so much more than a pleasant personality trait. When you encounter something genuinely new, when your brain doesn't already have a filed-away answer, it triggers a cascade of activity. Neurons fire in unfamiliar patterns. The brain releases dopamine, the same molecule associated with reward and motivation, which researchers have found also enhances memory formation and encourages the growth of new neural connections. Curiosity essentially opens a biochemical door that allows learning to take root more deeply. Studies using brain imaging have shown that when people are in a state of curiosity, the hippocampus, the brain's memory center, shows increased activity and forms stronger, more lasting connections, even for unrelated information encountered during that curious state. Compare this to the brain of someone who has stopped asking questions, who has settled into a comfortable loop of familiar routines, familiar opinions, familiar answers. That brain isn't being punished exactly, but it isn't being challenged either. And a brain that isn't challenged gradually stops building new pathways. Existing pathways, the ones tied to old habits and old routines, become the only roads still in use, while entire regions capable of growth sit dormant. Large studies following older adults over many years have consistently found that those who maintain what researchers call cognitive engagement, meaning they continue learning new skills, exploring unfamiliar subjects, asking questions outside their existing knowledge, show significantly lower rates of cognitive decline and dementia compared to peers with similar education and health backgrounds who stopped engaging in novel learning. What's fascinating is that the specific activity mattered less than the novelty itself. Learning a musical instrument helped. Learning a new language helped. Taking up painting for the first time helped. Even something as simple as learning to navigate a new neighborhood or master an unfamiliar phone app showed measurable cognitive benefits. The common thread wasn't the subject matter, it was the state of not yet knowing and the willingness to sit inside that state long enough to learn. There's also something happening at a deeper biological level. Chronic novelty and learning appear to stimulate what's called cognitive reserve, essentially a buffer of neural connections and alternate pathways that the brain can draw upon if certain areas become damaged or affected by age-related changes. Two people can show identical levels of age-related brain changes on an imaging scan, yet one shows clear signs of dementia while the other continues functioning sharply. Researchers increasingly believe cognitive reserve, built through decades of curiosity and learning, explains much of that difference. The brain that kept asking questions built more roads, more detours, more alternate routes for information to travel, so that even when some paths become blocked, the mind finds another way through. I think of this every time I meet someone in their 80s who still asks me questions with genuine wonder in their eyes, who wants to know how a new medical discovery works, who picks up a musical instrument for the first time despite arthritis in their fingers, who insists on figuring out the new smartphone rather than asking someone else to do it for them. What I'm witnessing in that moment is a brain still actively building, still forming connections, still refusing to let curiosity go quiet. There is a moment that happens to almost everyone somewhere in their 70s. A close friend passes away. A spouse of 50 years is gone. Children move across the country, wrapped up in their own busy lives. And slowly, almost without anyone deciding it should happen this way, the guest list of a person's life gets shorter. What someone does in that moment, whether they let their world quietly shrink to fit the people who remain, or whether they go out and add new names to that list, turns out to be one of the most powerful and least appreciated predictors of how long and how well they will live. For years, social connection was treated as a nice to have, something good for the spirit but separate from the hard science of physical health. That assumption has been thoroughly overturned. A landmark analysis pooling data from over 300,000 people found that weak social connections carried a mortality risk comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes a day, and greater than the risk posed by obesity or physical inactivity. Let that comparison sit for a moment. Loneliness, in purely biological terms, can be as dangerous as a pack of cigarettes. But here is where the story becomes genuinely surprising. It isn't simply about having people around. Many people in their 70s and 80s are still surrounded by family, still have a spouse, still see the same handful of old friends. And yet research points to something more specific and more demanding than mere company. It is the act of continuing to form new relationships, even late in life, that appears to carry unique protective power. Why would meeting someone new matter more than maintaining relationships you already have? Because forming a new social bond requires something old friendships, however precious, no longer ask of you. It requires your brain to actively work. When you meet someone new, your mind must read unfamiliar facial expressions, interpret a voice and tone you've never heard before, navigate conversation without the shortcut of decades of shared history, and continuously judge in real time how to respond, what to share, when to laugh. This is an enormously sophisticated cognitive and emotional task, engaging regions of the brain responsible for social cognition, empathy, and executive function all at once. Old friendships, wonderful as they are, run largely on autopilot. New friendships demand the brain stay switched on. Researchers studying centenarians and long-lived populations around the world have consistently observed this same pattern. In these communities, older adults are rarely isolated to peers their own age. They remain embedded in multi-generational networks, forming new bonds with younger neighbors, welcoming newcomers into their social circles, joining new groups and activities well into their 80s and 90s. This continual expansion of the social circle appears to function almost like a vaccine against the isolation that so often accompanies advanced age. There's a biological mechanism behind this too. Positive social interaction has been shown to lower levels of cortisol, the stress hormone that, when chronically elevated, damages blood vessels, suppresses immune function, and accelerates cellular aging. Meanwhile, social bonding triggers the release of oxytocin, a hormone associated with trust and connection that appears to have anti-inflammatory effects throughout the body. Every time someone in their 80s strikes up a genuine new friendship, whether with a neighbor, a fellow volunteer, or someone met in a class or a club, their body isn't just feeling emotionally uplifted, it is undergoing a measurable hormonal shift, one that echoes through the cardiovascular system, the immune system, and the brain. There's also a quieter psychological force at work. Making a new friend in your 80s requires something that resembles courage. It means believing your life still has room to grow, that you still have something to offer someone who barely knows you yet, that your story isn't finished being written. This mindset, this refusal to treat old age as a closing chapter rather than a continuing one, appears again and again in studies of people who age with remarkable vitality. They don't see their social world as fixed. They see it as something still capable of expanding. I think of the many people I've encountered in their 80s who still join new clubs, who strike up conversations with strangers at the market, who invite a much younger neighbor over for coffee simply because they were curious to know them, who join an online group to discuss a hobby they only recently discovered. What I see in each of them isn't simply an active social life. I see a nervous system still practicing connection, a hormonal environment still calibrated toward trust and safety rather than isolation and threat, and a mind still convinced, correctly, that there is room in this world for one more person to know and be known by. So there they are, 4 simple, quiet habits, hiding in plain sight within the most ordinary moments of daily life. The strength of a handshake, the willingness to climb a flight of stairs, the stubborn refusal to stop asking questions, the courage to let a new person into your life, even now, even after all these years. None of these require prescription. None of them require a laboratory or a specialist. They require only a decision made again and again to keep engaging with the world rather than quietly retreating from it. And that, more than any single pill or procedure, may be the real secret behind the people who don't just survive their 70s and 80s, but genuinely thrive within them. If someone came to mind while you were listening today, a parent, a grandparent, a neighbor, or perhaps even yourself, I hope you'll carry these 4 ideas with you. Try the stairs today instead of the elevator. Ask one genuine question you don't already know the answer to. Reach out to someone new, even if it feels a little uncomfortable at first. Your body and your brain were built to keep responding to these small invitations, no matter how many years have passed. If this message resonated with you, I'd love for you to share it with someone in your life who needs to hear it. Leave a comment below and tell me which of these 6 habits you already practice or which one you're ready to start today. And if you want more science-backed insights on living a longer, fuller life, be sure to subscribe because this conversation is just beginning.